Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The sad case of Melany Steisy Amaya. Melany Steisy Amaya was born on February 22, 2002, in the municipality of San Rafael, in the department of Antioquia, Colombia. Her parents, William Amaya and Maria Leon, were overjoyed at her birth despite being very young. They had been planning to have a daughter, and their wish was finally fulfilled. Later, the family grew with the arrival of another girl, Natalie. The two sisters got along very well and played together all the time. From her childhood, Melany showed a cheerful and fun personality. Her smile was her main feature, and she was also very flirtatious, often asking her mother for makeup to paint her dolls. Despite not having many resources, her parents always managed to give her everything she needed. She was one of the best students in school, with excellent grades. Over the years, Melany developed a very strong character. She was proud and always wanted to be right about everything. However, this did not prevent her from having an excellent relationship with her mother. Whenever they fought, they would reconcile, share everything, and support each other. When Melany entered adolescence, her parents separated on good terms. Shortly after, Maria met Ruben Morales, and they became a couple. Later, they decided to move in together. Both Melany and her sister went with them, settling in the Manrique neighborhood in Medellin. Their relationship with their stepfather was excellent. They considered him their second father. Ruben respected their bond with William, always reminding them that he was there to help raise them, but did not want them to stop seeing their biological father. By the time she turned 16, Melany was a very pretty young woman who liked to dress up and go out partying. She had many friends who held her in high esteem. It was at this time that she discovered her passion: electronic music. She decided she wanted to be a DJ, and her family supported her in everything, beginning to save money to buy her a console. They were sure that whatever she did would be excellent, as she was extremely intelligent. However, Melany never got to fulfill her dreams. On Thursday, June 28, 2018, Melany was getting ready to go to the birthday party of Isaac, her best friend. Although they had celebrated the week before, they were ready for another party. The party was to be held at a nightclub located on Carrera 45, an area known for its nightlife. When she finished getting ready, she told her mother that she was leaving. Her mother asked her to take care and not to return too late. They hugged, and Melany got into her Uber heading to the club, but she never arrived. Isaac arrived at the nightclub and noticed his friend's absence. The techno music was very loud, and the place was crowded. He began to look for her everywhere. When he couldn't find her, he started sending her messages, but Melany didn't respond. Isaac thought she might be with Maria Londoño, her neighbor and closest friend, and decided to wait until the next day and celebrated his birthday as usual. Maria woke up at 7 in the morning and noticed that her daughter had not returned. Her room was just as she had left it the night before while getting ready. Worried, Maria began to call her phone, but it was out of service. She thought it might be out of battery and that Melany might be at a friend's house, but it seemed strange that she had not tried to communicate with her. Maria decided to call Isaac, who told her that Melany had never arrived at the nightclub and might be with a friend. Maria contacted all of her daughter's acquaintances, but there were no signs of her, and no one knew her whereabouts. Finally, she spoke to some friends who said that Melany had arrived at the club's door, but did not enter, thinking she might have gone to another party. Completely desperate, Maria called her ex-husband and gave him the terrible news. He tried to calm her, saying it was still early, and that Melany might be sleeping at someone's house. But the afternoon came, and Melany did not appear. Her parents tried to report her disappearance at the police station, but since it was a holiday, they were not taken seriously and were told to wait longer. Trying to stay composed, her parents thought she might have gone to a farm, probably celebrating the long weekend, likely with no cell phone signal, and that's why she hadn't communicated with them. But deep down, they knew that wasn't true. They sensed that something bad was happening. Maria, Ruben, and William began their own search, covering all the places where they thought Melany could be, from the houses of her acquaintances to parks and the streets of the nightclubs she frequented. After an initial search, they decided to post flyers all over the city with a detailed description of the young girl, including a photograph that Melany had taken the night she disappeared. She was seen wearing a short blouse, light blue jeans, and white sneakers. Her physical characteristics were described as slender, short in height, with black hair, brown eyes, and several tattoos: a rose on her chest, a moon on her forearm, and wings on her back. Her most distinctive tattoos were a fish on her right leg, covering a motorcycle burn, and one under her clavicle that said, "Crazy Life." She also had a belly button piercing and a peritonitis scar on her abdomen, making her easily recognizable. While distributing the flyers to pedestrians and police officers on the street, they made it clear they were utterly desperate and that the official search should start as soon as possible. The news spread quickly, and social media was flooded with images of Melany. The weekend passed terribly. Maria couldn't sleep, constantly thinking about her daughter. Finally, early on Monday, Maria went to the police station to report her daughter missing. The search was categorized as urgent due to Melany being a minor. Officers checked hospitals and morgues to see if anyone named Melany or matching her physical characteristics had been admitted, but they found no trace of her. Melany's parents clung to the hope of finding her alive, but the days became longer and her absence more worrying. Then, the first lead emerged. A witness approached the police station to give a statement, saying they had seen Melany on the night of June 28 near the El Pomar soccer field. They noted that the young woman was dirty and beaten, as if she had fallen, and was accompanied by a young man wearing loose clothes, a cap, and large sports shoes. While this testimony contributed to the search, the situation remained complicated. The description of the boy with Melany was very general, as most of her friends dressed that way. However, Maria thought of one person, Miguel Naranjo, her daughter's ex-boyfriend. The 18-year-old had ended his relationship with Melany 3 months earlier on bad terms. Maria asked her younger daughter to contact him. Miguel claimed to know nothing about Melany's whereabouts, emphasizing that he hadn't seen her for weeks. He then expressed great concern, saying he would be devastated if something happened to her, as he still cared for her deeply. However, days later, more testimonies contradicted Miguel's statements, with all witnesses saying they saw them together at a party that night, and that he was very drunk. Following these declarations, the prosecutor's office began to consider Miguel the main suspect in Melany's disappearance. They obtained a warrant to search his house, but they found no trace of Melany, leaving them back where they started, without the slightest idea of the girl's whereabouts. On July 5 of the same year, Maria woke up in anguish, unable to believe that her daughter was still missing. She prayed to God to bring her back, alive or dead, as she couldn't stand the uncertainty anymore. Her prayers were answered, but not in a good way. That same day, Maria received a call from an unknown number. On the other end of the line, a voice told her to stop searching for her daughter because she was already in another world and buried in a place called El Calvario. Without allowing for more questions, the caller asked Maria not to reveal their identity to the police, as they had not spoken earlier due to fear. After the call ended, Maria quickly headed to the police station. Along with her husband and 2 officers, they set out towards the mountain, and she also notified everyone she knew to help with the search. They arrived at El Granizal neighborhood of Medellin, where the mountain was located. The territory was large, with many entrances and full of bushes. To reach the hill, they had to climb many steep stairs and pass through squatter houses, which was extremely dangerous. They decided to split into several groups to cover the area more quickly. Ruben went towards an area full of bushes, behind one of the houses. The ground was full of large footprints, as if someone had been dragged. He followed the trail and noticed a sight with many flies buzzing around and a penetrating odor. He grabbed a stick and began moving the rocks on the ground. When he turned over one of them, he saw something terrible, a human head. He immediately called the police officers who were searching nearby. At first, they thought it could be an animal, as animals were often dumped in that area. They continued removing stones and spotted blood. Finally, they could clearly see the face, which was completely disfigured, but it was evident that it belonged to a human body. Maria couldn't stop crying, not wanting it to be her daughter. Natalie thought it might be another girl who had also been missing for some time. The whole family was in denial. The officers notified the forensic medicine services. When they were able to unearth the body, all doubts were cleared. Despite the mutilation, they could discern the tattoo on the girl's chest. The body was completely unclothed, with the mouth open and filled with dirt, all teeth broken, and one of the eyes dislodged. There was also something very strange. The person who buried her had thrown calcium oxide over her. The body was exhumed by the criminalistics and transferred to the Institute of Legal Medicine and Forensic Sciences. After a few hours, experts confirmed that it was none other than Melany. Although her body showed signs of all types of violence, the cause of death was mechanical asphyxia. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, it could not be determined if the young woman had been sexually abused, but they could confirm that she had been severely mistreated. Her family was inconsolable. There was no longer any hope of finding her alive, but they could still find the terrible person who had committed the sinister crime. The media published the news of the discovery, and all viewers' eyes turned to Ruben, believing that the fact he had found the body while alone made him a possible suspect. However, the community had other opinions. They knew Melany had no enemies, but had an idea of who might want to harm her. Everyone was aware that her relationship with Miguel had not ended well, and that he was a rather violent young man. Meanwhile, Miguel continued sending messages to Melany's relatives, saying he was very distressed by the young woman's loss and had done everything possible to find her. But no one believed him anymore, and an angry mob of neighbors showed up at his home to lynch him. The police took advantage of this event to take him to the police station, claiming they were protecting him, but the real objective was to interrogate him. His statement was quick. He said he was innocent and seemed very sure of his words. As there was no evidence against him, they had to let him go. Almost simultaneously, Ruben was cleared of any involvement in the case. There was no evidence suggesting he had anything to do with his stepdaughter's murder. Even with Miguel as the main suspect, investigators began to delve into the relationship he had with Melany. According to sources close to the young woman, the couple met in 2016 when she was 14 and he was 17. Melany organized a party with her best friends and hired a DJ, who was Miguel. She was enchanted by him, and they began dating that same week. later becoming official. They went everywhere together, even on outings with friends. Everyone liked Miguel. They noticed he was loving with Melany and cared for her deeply. Over the months, the young man started spending more and more time at her house, becoming an integral part of the family. Maria knew that Miguel had problems with his mother. He had told her that she often beat him and sometimes left him without food. Melany's family cared for him so much that they decided to take him into their home as if he were another son. In the first months of living together, everything was rosy, and they were closer than ever. However, over time, the relationship between the two teenagers began to crumble. They argued constantly, and Miguel was extremely bothered by Melany's liking for dressing up flirtatiously. She was so affected that she decided to leave school and started doing something she had never done before: consuming substances. Maria took a while to realize this and confronted her daughter. Melany told her she had only done it a few times, always in Miguel's company. This is how Miguel lost all the trust and respect of the family, and from then on, the situation only worsened. The fights became violent and physical. Miguel constantly hit Melany, leaving marks on her neck and arms. One day, he beat her so severely that he stained the entire room with blood. Maria tried to help her daughter, but Melany asked her not to interfere in their relationship and pleaded to continue living together. Their friends were also worried. They noticed how her spirit was fading. They saw her cry every day and advised her to leave him. After 2 years of ups and downs, on May 23, 2018, the young couple had their last violent fight. Melany decided to definitively leave Miguel and threw him out of her house, but he did not accept this and began to stalk and follow her everywhere. Ruben decided to go to the prosecutor's office to report that his stepdaughter was in danger and request a restraining order. But sadly, this measure was never carried out. In the following months, Miguel continued to seek Melany, swearing that if she gave him another chance, he would do things differently, but she never agreed. And so, without any help from the police, the young woman tried to continue with her life as normally as possible until the terrible incident on June 28. After gathering all possible testimonies about the young couple's relationship, the officers investigated Miguel's criminal history. They discovered that despite his young age, he already had reports of domestic abuse. Records indicated he had beaten his mother and siblings. They also found the report Ruben had filed months earlier and the testimony of a friend of Melany's. This young man declared that Miguel had said if he found out she was with someone else, he would kill her, but that wasn't the most shocking part. The person who had called Maria decided to reveal their identity. It was a relative of Miguel's who lived with him in a residence, very close to where Melany's body was found. The relative recounted that on the night of June 29, they saw Miguel arrive at the house around midnight with a shovel and muddy shoes. Minutes later, he started a fire and began burning clothes and makeup, then took a long shower. With all the evidence gathered, on July 10 of that year, the agents obtained an arrest warrant against Miguel. He voluntarily presented himself at the police and was charged with aggravated femicide. He did not accept the charges and declared himself innocent, with a strange smile on his face. After 6 months of delaying the judicial process, Miguel decided to make a plea deal, accepting the charges that identified him as the author of the crime in exchange for a reduced sentence. Once the judges agreed, he began to recount the last hours of the young woman's life. On June 28, 2018, Miguel saw Melany at the disco where Isaac's birthday party would be held. He approached to talk to her, but quickly noticed she was exchanging messages with another boy. This triggered uncontrollable jealousy in him. He couldn't believe she already had another man. They began a heated argument, which turned violent. He hit her hard and threw her to the ground. Then they went to a football field, where the dispute continued. At some point, he grabbed her by the neck and strangled her until she died. At that moment, he decided to hid her body. He then returned home to burn her clothes and belongings. In his statement, Mikkel excused himself by saying he had acted under the influence of drugs. The account was quite imprecise. Mikkel did not want to clarify where he killed Melany or how he hid the body. The agents assumed that after taking her to the sports complex, he persuaded her to talk alone near where he buried her. They only had two certainties. Mikkel was guilty of femicide, and his motive for committing the crime had been jealousy and obsession. Psychological analyses showed that he was an aggressive, possessive person with an explosive character. However, they also proved that he was fully aware of his actions when he committed the crime, so he had to face trial. On Friday, January 18, 2019, almost 7 months after the young woman's murder, the first hearing was held. Mikkel was found guilty of aggravated femicide and sentenced to 34 years and 8 months in prison. After hearing the jury's decision, he apologized to Melany's family and society and was transferred to a prison in Medellin. While the family was satisfied with the verdict, they all said they would never forgive him. After the trial, they united more than ever. The young woman's biological father thanked everyone on his Facebook account for the support they had given him during the process. He said that although the sentence would not bring his daughter back, it at least set an example that such cases do not always go unpunished. However, there is a reality. The authorities had been alerted about Mikkel's dangerousness. If they had followed through with the restraining order, Melany might still be alive. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another Unreal True Crime. The horrible James Bulger case. The horrible James Bulger case. On February 12, 1993, a Friday afternoon in Bootle, England, specifically at the New Strand Shopping Centre, Denise was with a friend and her son, James Bulger. James had recently stopped using a stroller, as he was 2 years and 10 months old, so he was walking alongside his mother. At around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Denise's friend took a different path, leaving Denise alone with her little James. At one point, Denise went to a store with her son, bought what she needed, and when she realized it, she saw that James was not with her. It was only a momentary distraction for a few seconds as she checked her purse, but this oversight would change their lives forever. We all have memories of getting separated from family members in a shopping center as children, so the response here was quite common. When Denise left the store, she reunited with her friend, who had just passed by the front of the shop, but she didn't see James anywhere. They assumed he had wandered off, so they began asking the mall security guards and anyone they encountered if they had seen the child. Soon, announcements were made over the mall speakers, inquiring about James, and as desperation mounted, several police patrols combed the area until nightfall, yet there was still no sign of James. The next step for the police was to review the shopping center's security cameras, as it was their only hope of discovering what had happened that afternoon with James. It was 1993, and security cameras had limited resolution at that time, and this particular shopping center didn't have many of them. However, one camera happened to be pointed at the store. The footage showed James leaving through the door, and Denny's lapse in attention was indeed brief, as within a minute she could be seen searching for James at the door, but by then it was already too late. The next trace of James was captured by one of the overhead cameras, showing him following two individuals. What was unusual was that these two individuals appeared to be teenagers, seemingly between the ages of 14 and 18. In the final image of James, he was seen leaving the shopping center with one of these boys holding his hand. Initially, there was hope, with the court thinking that these young boys wouldn't be capable of harming little James. However, 2 days later, the truth would come to light. More than 4 kilometers away from the shopping center, while playing, some teenagers stumbled upon the remains of a child on the train tracks, who had apparently been struck by a train. This discovery immediately set off alarms, and they contacted one of James' uncles, who unmistakably identified the child as James Bulger. It was clear that this was no accident. In fact, all evidence suggested that James had died before being struck by the train. His body bore so many injuries that investigators couldn't determine the exact cause of his death. There were 2 more unsettling details. He had a pair of batteries in his mouth, and his left eye had been eerily painted blue. It was as if his young body had been subjected to inhumane experimentation, and the crime scene would remain etched in the memory of all the officers present as one of the most horrifying scenes they had ever encountered in their careers. The local community was in shock and outrage over the tragic incident. Many expressed their heartfelt condolences to the family, particularly Denise. While she had a momentary lapse of attention, it was a mistake anyone could make, and those with empathy could understand the immense pain she was going through. She replayed in her mind daily the haunting thought that she might have saved her son had she been more vigilant at that moment. In addition to the sympathy, there were some individuals, including her own husband at one point, who angrily confronted her and blamed her for not being attentive enough, asserting that the tragedy could have been prevented with more careful supervision. The potential key to identifying the culprit lay in the shopping center's security cameras, but their image quality was so poor that even determining the suspects' ages was impossible. Various media outlets attempted to enhance the images in hopes of identifying the individuals, but their efforts proved fruitless. The last glimmer of hope rested on someone coming forward to confess to the crime. On February 16, just 2 days after James' body was discovered, the police received a crucial call. The caller accused a 12-year-old boy named Jonathan Green of being the perpetrator, and shockingly, this accusation came from his own parents. They claimed that their son bore a resemblance to one of the suspects captured in the security camera footage, a grave accusation indeed when it comes from one's own parents. Law enforcement took this accusation seriously and subjected Jonathan to nearly 23 hours of relentless interrogation before eventually declaring him innocent. In a subsequent interview, Jonathan revealed the profound psychological trauma he endured during this time, spending countless sleepless nights. The intensity of the questioning even tempted him to falsely admit guilt at one point. The parents, however, did not hesitate much before making the accusation, even though the images they based it on were captured just days earlier. Furthermore, Jonathan was a mere 12 years old, and giving him the benefit of the doubt should have been a priority. The only evidence against him was a vague resemblance, which wasn't particularly strong given the poor image quality, akin to images taken through a blender. The media, driven by the pursuit of attention, without much consideration, broadcasted Jonathan as the prime suspect. This prompted people, fueled by a thirst for justice, to attack the vehicle in which he traveled with his parents and to vandalize their home by pelting it with stones until all the windows were shattered. The harassment was so severe that the Greens had to abandon their home and relocate to another city. Just 6 days after James' disappearance, a television program showed all available information about the case up to that date, hoping that a viewer might provide a clue to apprehend the culprits. The program was immensely popular at the time, and following its broadcast, the police received several calls, with one call standing out as particularly valuable. It came from a woman who firmly believed that the real culprits were Robert Thompson and John Venables. These boys were known for their mischievous behavior, which had escalated into criminal activities such as theft. They had gained a notorious reputation at their schools and were frequent truants. However, a significant conflict arose when the police suspected that the culprits were at least 14 years old, while these potential suspects were just 10 years old. Due to this discrepancy and the fact that there were several other suspects of similar age, the police decided to pay a visit to the homes of these young boys, although their expectations were not high. Initially, they observed some peculiar behavior, but it was challenging to draw definitive conclusions from these observations since the police had very little experience dealing with child offenders of this age. Subsequently, it was confirmed that both boys had skipped school on that particular day. Additionally, there was a noticeable detail. One of John's shoes displayed clear stains of blue paint. This piece of evidence led the authorities to consider them as prime suspects, and they were promptly taken to the police station. Unlike the previous case with Jonathan, this time the authorities handled it discreetly to prevent the young boys from enduring the extensive hours of questioning in a single session. Consequently, the interrogations were spread out over multiple days. The initial day of questioning proved to be challenging, given the boys' age of just 10, and the authorities couldn't subject them to the same scrutiny as adults. As a result, both boys steadfastly denied any involvement in the crime, and their age and emotional state played a significant role in this response. However, as the interrogations continued into the second day, a marked contrast emerged between Robert and John. Robert remained composed, displaying little emotion, not shedding a tear, and maintaining a stoic demeanor. On the other hand, John's emotional resilience began to waver, and he eventually confessed to the crime. John revealed that on that fateful afternoon, he and Robert had decided to skip school as they often did and ventured to the shopping center. Their initial actions upon arrival included stealing various items, among them a pair of batteries and a can of blue paint. Growing weary of their theft spree, a sinister idea took hold in their young minds: the idea of kidnapping a child. They planned to take the child onto the street and push them in front of an oncoming car. To execute this plan, they first signaled to another child to approach them. Fortunately, the child's vigilant mother intervened in time, preventing any harm. Continuing with their disturbing plan, as they passed by a butcher shop, they signaled to James Bulger through the window. Tragically, James responded to their call and left the shop, unbeknownst to his mother. The two boys quickly whisked James away from the shopping center to carry out their dark scheme. However, James, with his remarkable balance, made it challenging for them to push him far enough onto the road for a car to strike him. Undeterred, they decided to take James to a nearby canal, intending to push him in and drown him. Upon reaching the canal, they pushed him from above, but instead of falling into the water, James tumbled and struck his forehead, resulting in a visible bump. His cries for help filled the air. It is estimated that approximately 38 individuals witnessed these two boys with James, and a few inquired about their actions. Initially, one of the boys falsely claimed that they were brothers, which caused frustration among those who witnessed the incident. It is important to note that the onlookers faced a challenging situation involving children who appeared innocent, making intervention at the time more complex. However, what remains alarming and subject to criticism is the false explanation provided by John and Robert to one individual, stating that James was a lost child, and they were taking him to a police station. At that point, an adult had to be held accountable, because this tragic incident could have been prevented. It's clearly irresponsible to entrust the care of a lost child to two 10-year-olds. After walking for more than 4 kilometers, the boys took James to a remote railway track, devoid of any witnesses, and carried out unspeakable acts that are too gruesome to detail. They utilized whatever items they could find, including bricks, stones, and even a hefty 10-kilogram metal bar, inflicting unimaginable suffering upon James. When he lay lifeless, their intentions were unclear, whether to stage it as an accident or to inflict further harm on this young life. They left his lifeless body on the railway track, concealed beneath debris, to remain unnoticed until a passing train. Even the police found it difficult to comprehend such a horrifying reality, and they believed that there must have been prior signs or indicators. Consequently, they decided to delve into the backgrounds of these two young boys. As the police investigation continued, it became evident that both boys had experienced remarkably similar childhoods. Robert Thompson resided in a dysfunctional household where he and his 6 siblings suffered constant abuse from their father. His mother grappled with severe alcohol-related issues and had once attempted suicide while setting their home on fire. Robert had earned a reputation as a thief, displaying violent tendencies and compulsive lying. John Venables, on the other hand, came from a fractured family where his parents were divorced, and he received minimal attention and affection. Coupled with his short temper, John often engaged in mischief and fights to garner attention, eventually leading to his expulsion from school. It's widely believed that Robert took on the role of the ringleader during their terrible actions. Throughout the interrogations, both boys attempted to shift blame onto each other. Robert, displaying a shrewd demeanor, would acknowledge his presence but claim that he left when he saw John beginning to torment James on the railway tracks. When confronted with questions that cornered him, he would feign tears without shedding a single drop. However, the presence of blood and strands of James' hair on his clothing, particularly his shoes, served as irrefutable evidence of his involvement. Consequently, on February 20, both were declared guilty, identified only as Boy A and Boy B to circumvent potential issues similar to those faced by Jonathan Green. It was known only that they were two 10-year-old boys residing in Walton. This case was a recipe for turmoil. The brutal murder of a child as innocent as a 2-year-old had shaken the community, evoking tears and profound anger. The sentiment was so intense that it practically condemned the perpetrators to a life in hiding if they ever ventured into the public sphere. Yet, these culprits were merely children of 10, making any sentencing decision the subject of heated controversy. There was a significant divide in public opinion regarding the appropriate punishment for John Venables and Robert Thompson. While some called for the death penalty, others believed that a regular prison sentence would suffice. The debate also centered around the issue of anonymity. Why should these boys be shielded from public exposure when other murderers were not afforded the same privilege? Revealing their real names would effectively have been a death sentence, erasing all the efforts invested in their psychological rehabilitation. However, some may argue that if they didn't afford James a chance to live, why should they be allowed to live freely? When the trial started, the parents of the accused were moved to different parts of the country and assumed new identities following death threats. The full trial opened at Sessions House, Preston, on 1 November 1993, conducted as an adult trial with the accused in the dock away from their parents, and the judge and court officials in legal regalia. The boys denied the charges of murder, abduction, and attempted abduction. James's mother, devastated by the loss of her son, could only muster the strength to attend the day of the verdict. It wasn't until the sentencing that the judge permitted the media to publish the faces of Robert and John, who had shown no remorse throughout the 17-day trial. The evidence presented indicated that both boys understood the difference between right and wrong. John's tears seemed to stem from the anticipation of their impending fate, while Robert remained emotionally detached. With this knowledge in mind, on November 24, 1993, John Venables and Robert Thompson, initially facing a minimum of 15 years in prison, received a different sentence. They were to be held in a juvenile detention center until they turned 18, avoiding a real prison experience. This decision disappointed the public to the extent that riots erupted and vehicles believed to be carrying the boys were vandalized. However, these vehicles were decoys, and the boys were transported discreetly in other vehicles. From that point onward, they were granted new identities, shrouded in secrecy, known only to the authorities tasked with monitoring their lives. Initially, public outrage soared when news broke that the government had allocated £1.5 million, roughly equivalent to $2 million, for the rehabilitation of these young boys. This sparked a moral dilemma, as many argued that this substantial sum could have been better spent on saving innocent children, providing them with essential medications and sustenance. After all, this money came from hard-working taxpayers who weren't keen on supporting these boys financially. Some demanded a minimum prison sentence of 15 years for the young offenders, and this demand held some validity. Despite the expertise of psychologists, it's well established that by the age of 18, an individual's brain hasn't fully matured and latent issues may surface. Allowing potentially dangerous individuals to exit psychological support at this age was seen as a considerable risk. In June 2001, both boys were released, and their anonymity would only be lifted if they committed another crime. Interestingly, Robert, who initially appeared more problematic, managed to stay clear of criminal activity. On the contrary, John's behavior took a different turn, becoming a focal point for those questioning the efficacy of the system and how such individuals could be allowed to reintegrate into society. John's criminal history began with a brief jail sentence in 2008 for instigating a bar brawl and being found in possession of drugs. In 2010, he faced arrest for possessing indecent images related to child abuse. Subsequently, he was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison after confessing to downloading and disseminating such content online. Although he was released in 2013, he returned to jail in 2017 on the same charges. This time, he received a 40-month prison term after admitting to possessing over 1,000 explicit images. The exact details of his release and subsequent actions remain unclear, as authorities, seemingly regardless of his actions, continue to shield him from public scrutiny. Even 2 decades after the initial crime, John managed to claim another victim, 36-year-old Scott Bradley. Scott, a family man, fell prey to false rumors that he was, in fact, Robert Thompson. Over several months, he endured relentless harassment, insults, and threats directed at his family, and most importantly, his beloved son. During one phone call, he confided in his mother, expressing his unbearable distress and a desire to end his own life. Regrettably, she didn't take his words seriously, assuming the situation would eventually subside. Tragically, on August 10, 2012, Scott Bradley's mother discovered her son's lifeless body hanging from a noose. When authorities arrived at the scene, they determined it was a case of suicide. The mother of James Bulger, along with countless others, couldn't help but wonder if this tragedy might have been averted had the true identities of the original perpetrators been revealed. In late June 2019, it was reported that British officials had considered resettling Venables in Canada, Australia, or New Zealand due to the high cost behind protecting his anonymity. British authorities had reportedly spent £65,000 in legal fees to keep Venables' identity a secret. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Crime Analysis Central. See you soon. Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Melany Bachmeier. Melany Bachmeier was born on June 3, 1950, in Sarstedt, West Germany. Her family ended up there following the public persecution and scrutiny her father faced for being a former official of the German National Socialist Party. During World War II, he was a member of the notorious SS. As a result, Melany was raised in a very conservative home by deeply religious tutors. It's said that she never had a happy childhood due to a lack of close relationship with her parents. Her father was authoritarian, abusive, and an alcoholic, often spending more time at a bar near their home than with his family. Melany's mother was also distant, rarely speaking or spending time with her daughter. The situation worsened due to her father's drinking, which increased his aggression towards the family. This ended with the parents' divorce and the father leaving the house. Melany thought she could finally be free and happy, but soon her mother remarried another abusive man. Unfortunately, instead of Melany and her mother uniting against the man, they both turned against Melany, blaming her for the family's problems. This broke their relationship, and Melany, seen as a troublesome teenager, was eventually kicked out of the house. During her adolescence, Melany faced multiple assaults from different men, leading to the birth of her first child at just 16. She was forced to give the baby up for adoption due to lack of resources and because the baby's father abandoned her. 2 years later, Melany got pregnant again by her then abusive boyfriend. Despite the circumstances, she wanted to keep the baby, but before the child's birth, she experienced another traumatic assault at a nightclub. Her boyfriend left her, and she gave up this second child for adoption as well. Later, Melany dropped out of school and sought work to support herself. She started working at a bar named Tipasa, where she met the manager, and after some time, they became a couple. At 22, she became pregnant with her third child and felt ready to raise the baby with some resources and a home. However, her then boyfriend disagreed with her decision, ending their relationship. Melany, firm in her choice, decided to raise her daughter Anna alone, despite her parents' demands to give her up for adoption like her previous children. After Anna's birth, Melany vowed to be a good mother and underwent a tubal ligation, a common practice at the time to prevent overpopulation. Melany and Anna lived together in Lübeck, Germany, and despite challenges, they made it through. Indeed, Melany was happy because her daughter was the only person in her life who did not intend to harm her, unlike her parents or ex-partners. However, raising Anna alone meant Melany had to take her to work at the bar, so she could only attend to her daughter during her few breaks. Years later, people close to Melany would say that she treated Anna like a little adult and expected her to take care of many things on her own from a young age. Anna often slept in the bar while Melany was working, and a friend described Anna as a very vibrant and creative child who unfortunately never had a pleasant family life, as she only occasionally saw her father at the bar. Some stories also mention that Melany worked late into the night and then slept all day, leaving her 7-year-old daughter alone for much of the day. Anna used this time to play around the neighborhood alone, greeting people and playing with their pets. It was even mentioned that Melany was aware of her problematic lifestyle and sometimes contemplated the idea of giving Anna up for adoption. This leads us to May 5, 1980, where it is unclear exactly what happened that morning between Anna and Marianne. Some say they argued because Anna woke up in a bad mood and stubbornly did not want to go to school but wanted to play in the park, which Marianne did not allow. There's another version where Anna asked permission from her mother to skip school to play in the park with friends, and Marianne eventually let her go, not suspecting her daughter's real intentions to play elsewhere. Regardless, Anna was playing outside when the ensuing events turned into a tragedy in Marianne's life. When Marianne returned home later that day, she found it strange not to find her daughter anywhere but decided to wait a few more hours for her return. As time passed and Anna did not return, Marianne started searching the neighborhood. She asked Anna's friends and locals if they knew anything about her daughter, but nobody knew anything. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. So Marianne reported this anomaly to the police. The next day, a very upset and nervous woman arrived at the police. It seemed that this man, Klaus Grabowski, 35 years old, was overcome with guilt after the act and couldn't find peace. He ended up confessing in detail what happened to his girlfriend. This caused a great argument, after which he left, confused, to go to a bar for a beer. His girlfriend took this opportunity to go to the police station to report him. The truth was that Anna had been abducted by Klaus, who owned a butcher shop near Marianne's house. Anna had gone there intending to play because the man had promised her that she could play with his cats whenever she wanted to visit. Innocently, Anna went and rang the doorbell. Klaus received her and kept her in his house for several hours, assaulting her multiple times until finally, to prevent the child from confessing the facts, he ended her life by suffocation with a pair of his girlfriend's stockings. Klaus Grabowski had a history of criminal activities and had previously been convicted for the assault of 2 young girls. He was known to have a troubled past. In 1973, he attacked a 6-year-old girl and was charged with attempted murder. 2 years later, he faced charges for these crimes, leading to a psychological evaluation. The results indicated he had an abnormal sexual instinct and significantly limited capacity to control it. Consequently, he was sent to a psychological treatment center instead of prison. A few years later, Klaus was offered the option of undergoing a controversial chemical castration procedure in exchange for early release, which he readily accepted. This procedure involved administering drugs to reduce libido and testosterone levels, reducing the likelihood of reoffending. Klaus preferred this option over returning to a mental health facility. It was a common practice for offenders of such crimes, often resulting in reduced sentences under the assumption that they no longer posed a societal threat. Despite the reversibility of this procedure, Klaus was released soon after undergoing it, without subsequent psychological evaluations. 2 years later, he underwent hormonal treatment to reverse the chemical castration, increasing his testosterone levels. This treatment was approved by the court under the pretext that he wanted to start a family with his girlfriend and lead a normal life, thus misleading everyone about his true nature. On the day of the incident, authorities quickly headed to Klaus's residence, but couldn't find him. He had taken Anna's body and left a note for his girlfriend, asking her to meet him at a bar that night to discuss the situation. The police took this opportunity to wait for Klaus at the bar and arrested him upon his arrival. After his arrest, Klaus claimed he had no intention of inappropriately touching Anna. He despicably defended himself by alleging that the child tried to seduce and extort him, and fear of returning to jail drove him to end her life. He claimed Anna had threatened to tell her mother he had inappropriately touched her, a claim he insisted was false and made with the intent to extort money from him. Klaus revealed he had hidden the body in a cardboard box near a canal. When the police informed Marianne about her daughter's whereabouts and tragic demise, she was devastated. However, the trial brought further anguish. Marianne was forced to hear testimonies and descriptions about her life and Anna's, suggesting that Anna was practically raised on the streets and that such an incident was inevitable due to Marianne's negligence as a bar waitress who worked late nights and neglected her daughter. This left Marianne heartbroken and furious, particularly tormented by the possibility that Anna's killer might not receive the maximum penalty due to potential claims of mental health issues, which could allow him to avoid prison. Consequently, Marianne silently began to devise a plan to avenge her daughter's death, regardless of the consequences. During the trial, Klaus Grabowski repeatedly claimed that Anna had seduced and extorted him for money, insisting that his actions were driven by the fear of returning to jail. His defense also centered around the idea that the hormonal treatment he was undergoing significantly affected him and led to violent outbursts. Frustrated and injured by these lies, Marianne decided to buy a gun and secretly practice shooting. Every time Marianne attended the trial, her displeasure was evident, especially when she heard statements that defamed her 7-year-old daughter. At one point, she expressed clear anger, unable to bear listening to Klaus and his lawyer's fabrications. However, the trial took a dramatic turn on its third day, March 6, 1981. Marianne arrived at the courtroom later than usual, entering with an expressionless face. She walked with an upright posture, her hands in the pockets of her white coat. Unbeknownst to others, she had managed to bypass the strict security measures of the judicial establishment with a pistol in her pocket. As the judge and others in the courtroom carried on with the proceedings, Klaus, with his back to Marianne, faced the judge. At this moment, Marianne stood still, her nerves palpable. She seized the opportunity to act when Klaus stood up to give his statement. Marianne pulled out the pistol and fired 7 shots, 6 of which struck Klaus, causing him to collapse. The precision of her shots was noted by many. Marianne remained expressionless throughout, slightly moving her lips as she fired. She made no attempt to flee and did not resist when the courtroom security detained her. Marianne was heard saying, "That pig killed my daughter. He shot her in the face, but I shot him in the back. I hope he's dead." Her wish was confirmed when an officer checked Klaus and declared him dead. Upon hearing this, a look of relief crossed Marianne's face, contrasting her previous expressions. However, Marianne now faced her own trial, which would not be easy to escape. Those who witnessed the incident noted that Marianne seemed to be in a trance, struggling to comprehend her actions. The forensic psychiatrist examined her, asking her to write something to analyze her handwriting and mental state. Marianne wrote, "I did it for Anna," surrounding the sentence with 7 hearts, possibly representing each year of Anna's life. The next day, German newspapers displayed Marianne's photo, dubbing her the avenging mother. The case became the most well-known instance of vigilante justice in West Germany, garnering extensive media coverage. Television crews from across Europe rushed to report on the case, highlighting its extraordinary and tragic nature. Marianne was quickly brought to trial for murder. During her trial, she testified that she was not fully aware of her actions, claiming she was in a trance and even had a dream where she saw Anna walking through the courtrooms. She also mentioned her mental health had deteriorated significantly following the events. Marianne then told a lie that likely worsened her standing with the judge. She claimed she had bought the gun to end her own life, but no one believed she hadn't premeditated her actions and practiced with the weapon before using it in court. Many people in Germany and around the world supported Marianne for taking matters into her own hands, as they felt the system had failed by previously freeing Klaus and authorizing his hormonal treatment without proper evaluation. They saw it as fair to set her free. However, there were also those who viewed Marianne as a criminal who had taken justice into her own hands in the worst possible way, labeling her a murderer. Others judged her for being an irresponsible mother who had given up her other 2 children for adoption and committed a cold-blooded crime that could have harmed others in the process. With all this controversy and mixed feelings, Marianne was charged with murder in a judicial process for the death of Klaus Grabowski on November 2, 1982. The prosecution later withdrew the charge, and after 28 days of negotiations, the jury reached a verdict. In March 1983, Marianne was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and illegal possession of a firearm, sentenced to 6 years in prison. 3 years later, the authorities reconsidered, believing she didn't deserve any sentence. Soon after, Marianne sold her life story for about 250,000 German marks in an exclusive to a news magazine, stating she did it to pay off the debts caused by the judicial process. Following the fall of the Berlin Wall, she returned to a now unified Germany after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. During this time, Marianne was interviewed by various media outlets, often placed in tense situations with questions comparing her to Klaus, as both were murderers. Despite this, she maintained her composure, stating she did what she did to ensure Klaus faced justice for his actions against the 7-year-old girl, even as he continued to spread lies about her in his final moments. Knowing her illness was terminal, Marianne asked a reporter to accompany her with a movie camera until her last moments. Marianne passed away at the age of 46 on September 17, 1996, from pancreatic cancer. She was buried next to her daughter Anna's grave in the Lübeck cemetery. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon.